Hello everyone and happy June! Today I'm going to be sharing with you the books that I read in May. I read 4 books because this month was quite busy. This past weekend we celebrated my sister's baby shower. She is pregnant with her first child, so I'm going to be an auntie and I'm very excited. And so this month has been just me doing a lot of work after coming home from being in the UK for a couple months and then preparing for my sister's baby shower, helping her paint her baby's room. I've just been doing so many wonderful things with my family. I haven't had a ton of time to read, although I have read 4 amazing books. So last month I also read 4 books because it was also a busy month. This month I've also again read 4 books, but I'm really happy with the amount of reading that I've done with all the stuff that's been going on. Anyway, I would love to know how your spring has been going, how your May has been going, and what books you've been reading. I love hearing how you're doing and what books you're reading, so please feel free to share that with me in the comments. Thankfully, like the previous months of 2025, I have been reading such wonderful books, and this reading year is truly one of the best reading years I've ever had, and I'm so happy that it's continuing on because I think I'm just really honing in on what I know I'll enjoy. And if I start something, usually an audiobook, I feel like most of the books I own, there's a very good chance that I'll enjoy. But if I'm trying something out, usually I try it out in an audiobook or through my Kindle, borrowing it from the library. So anyway, the first book that I read and finished in May was The Garden Against Time: In Search of a Common Paradise by Olivia Laing. This is a fantastic nonfiction book where Olivia Laing combines gardening, literature, art, poetry, and just her own experiences in one book. So this is not only a memoir about gardening and flowers, it's also, she meditates on the life of John Clare, the poet. She speaks a lot about William Morris, the gardener and artist and writer, and a lot of different elements of storytelling and how gardens can be a type of common paradise. She talks a lot about Milton's Paradise Lost and a lot of other different literary elements that I found really interesting. So if you love literature and you like gardens and the association between how gardens play a role in literature as well as just in our lives. She touches on so many other topics as well, which I think is just so fascinating, and this book was really such a treasure trove. I physically read it and I listened to it through the audiobook, and she narrates the audiobook herself, and it was wonderful. I've really been interested in reading a lot of nonfiction through audiobooks. Most of the audiobooks I've been listening to recently have been nonfiction, which leads me into the next book that I want to tell you about, and that is The Salt Path by Rainer Wynn. So this was gifted to me along with the other 2 books in the series. These were gifted to me by my lovely mother-in-law for Christmas. She gave them to Leon and I, and I've been wanting to read this book for a while, and she didn't even know that, so when I saw it I got really excited. And this is a fantastic story about this couple who, through certain circumstances, they lose their financial stability and they become homeless in a very heartbreaking way. And I don't want to give too much away, but I want to give you enough. And it's about them going on this very long coastal walk in the UK. On the back it says, just days after Rainer Wynn learned that Moth, her husband of 32 years, was terminally ill, they lost their home and livelihood. With nothing left and little time, they impulsively decide to walk the 630-mile southwest coast path from Somerset to Dorset, via Devon and Cornwall. Living wild and free at the mercy of sea and sky, they discovered a new, liberating existence. But what would they find at the journey's end? It was such an incredible story because it's a real story, it's a true story. This was also turned into a movie, which I definitely want to watch, but I really loved how she spoke about homelessness. It made me think about homelessness in such a different way, and it made me really question how we perceive the homeless and the circumstances that people are in. And the way she spoke about the thought of having to lose him to this illness was so devastating and heartbreaking and relatable. The way that, even though Leon and I have only been married for 1 year, today, when I'm filming this, is actually our 1-year wedding anniversary. So happy anniversary to us. But just even being married for 1 year, and not to get extremely mushy, but I just can't imagine my life without him, because he really is my other half. And the way that she spoke about how she feels with her relationship with her husband, it's like, you're two people, but your life is together and intertwined, and it's unimaginable having to go through life alone after being with that person, especially they've been together, like the back says, for 32 years. So I can't even imagine, how I feel about my marriage with Leon now after 1 year. I can't even imagine how she must feel after 32 years, and she also has 2 children, so it's a lot about like how she feels about her as a parent, how she feels about being a wife and a caregiver, and the different trials and tribulations that her husband and she goes on this coastal walk. I found it so inspiring and beautiful, and also heartbreaking. Again, I did listen to the audiobook, which Rainer Wynn did narrate herself, and she did such an amazing job, and I just loved it. I love hearing nonfiction accounts from the person who is writing about their experiences, because it's just such an authentic way of taking in their story. As much as it's wonderful to physically read a nonfiction book about a person's experience, I think, like I said, hearing it in their voice gives it such an authentic feeling, and like they're really just speaking to you, telling you about their experiences. So I loved this and highly recommend it. Then, for the Well-Read Book Club, I read, with all of you lovely well-read readers, my last unread Jane Austen novel, and now I have read every single one of her completed novels. But now I get to look forward to reading her juvenilia and her uncompleted novels. But in May, I read and finished and fell in love with Mansfield Park. This was, oh my gosh, it was such an experience. It was wonderful. I loved every minute of it, and Jane Austen is firmly one of my favorite writers, favorite people, favorite historical figures on the planet. Like, I just find her so fascinating, and while I was reading this book, after I read this book, I went on such a Jane Austen binge on YouTube. I was researching every video about Mansfield Park, about Jane Austen herself. I discovered Jasna, which is the Jane Austen Society of North America, which it's a podcast, but they also have video episodes. I have just been consuming all Jane Austen content, and I have been loving it. So without rambling forever, I took an hour after finishing this book to write my review, so I thought I'd share it with you. Also, if you want to follow my book reviews, I always post them on Fable and Goodreads. I have really been loving writing more thoughtful reviews this year. That's been one of my reading goals, and it's been such a joy to really take my time with my book reviews, reflect on the stories that I've read, and I feel like it almost helps me remember what I've read. I think sharing my thoughts with you guys through these videos is really helpful as well, because it makes me evaluate the story, or makes me try to dissect it in a way to kind of explain my feelings about it. So I've really been enjoying my reviews, writing my reviews. So anyway, I'm thrilled to say that overall I adored this book. I thought Fanny was a fascinating character, as she was unlike many of Jane Austen's other heroines, who are obstinate and headstrong, clever and rich, imaginative to a fault, etc. I also enjoyed that the reader gets the opportunity to follow Fanny's character development from a young age, which is an opportunity we don't get in Austen's other novels. Fanny is meek and quiet, but strong enough to stand by her morals and integrity, which is where I believe this story truly shines. Jane Austen's explorations and discussions on class, education, and decency is done brilliantly. One of my favorite moments in the book is when Austen shows the stark contrast between the grand and genteel Mansfield Park in comparison to Fanny's cramped and noisy parental home. It perfectly illustrates the result of 2 very different marriages, one advantageous and one not so advantageous. Getting an insight into what Fanny's upbringing from the age of 10 could have been was fascinating because it completely changes her and the reader's perspective on life at Mansfield Park, which at that point in the novel we have grown accustomed to. Like Fanny, I longed to return to Mansfield's vast gardens, but I was also intrigued to explore more of the city, Portsmouth. In case you forgot, the thrush has gone out of the harbor. Unfortunately, I found the ending quite abrupt and surprisingly unromantic. I wish the reader could have seen a bit more emotional development between the two romantic leads. In truth, this is Austen's least romantic novel, but that doesn't tarnish my enjoyment of it in the least, because, as I said before, this story shines elsewhere. Overall, I truly loved this book. I can't believe I've officially read all of Jane Austen's complete novels. Weeps bittersweet tears. Thankfully, my Jane Austen journey is far from over. I can't wait to read her unfinished novels, Juvenilia, and reread her books for many years to come. Thank you, Jane. There is so much else I could say about this book, but I think that really covers my overall feelings about it. I think Jane Austen's so brilliant. I think this book is so unique. What I've heard from doing all of my research on YouTube, I have seen that Fanny tends to be everyone's kind of least favorite heroine, or the heroine that people can't really connect to as deeply as Jane Austen's other female main characters. And I just really found Fanny so fascinating in that she kind of deserves a bit more love. Just the circumstances that she's in, I understand why she is the way she is. And she surprisingly, and in a very minor way, reminded me of Jane Eyre, the character in the novel Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. And I really love Jane Eyre, it's one of my favorite books, and so that connection was interesting because although I think the Brontes and Jane Austen are on a similar pedestal of literary history and belovedness, they are quite different. Obviously, Charlotte Bronte is known for being much more gothic, and Jane Austen is known for being much more romantic and light and sunny and, that Regency glamour, I guess, if you could call it glamour. My feelings are so complicated because I think it deserves so much more love, although I really disliked the last chapter. I kind of just read the last chapter and then forgot about it because I wasn't super happy with how the story ended, but that was more along the romantic side of the story. I think the romance in this book is really not the best. But like I said in my review, that's not where this book shines. This book shines elsewhere. It shines in its explorations of marriage and education and class and society and coming of age and womanhood and friendship and loyalty and integrity, and there's just so much else that this book is, and I think out of all of Jane Austen's novels, it's the one that you should look at the least for romance, but the most for an interesting insight into the history of the time, and I just think it's brilliant, so I highly recommend it. And like I'm doing, I could ramble about it and talk about it for ages and ages, but I will stop now because I could just keep on going. Then I read a poetry collection from my favorite poetess, and that is Mary Oliver. This is her collection called Blue Horses, and I have been reading her bigger collection called Devotions. Here is Devotions. I have been reading this book for years. I've been reading it since 2021, and I've been taking my time with it because I never want it to end. This is just kind of like a beautiful life companion, but I wanted to read a shorter collection just so that I can feel like I have completed one of her works, because the only other book that I've finished from Mary Oliver is Upstream, which is an essay collection, which I love so much, and I've been reading Devotions, which is a big collection of her smaller collections. So some of the poems in Blue Horses is in Devotions, but not all of them. So I really want to read her smaller collections along with Devotions, if that makes sense. Reading Mary Oliver's poetry is like hearing my own thoughts in Mary Oliver's voice. She feels like such a kindred spirit, and her poems are an incredible comfort and an incredible light in my life. and every time I read her poems, I feel connected to her, I feel connected to the earth, to nature, to words, to poetry itself, and I can't recommend her poetry enough. If you are newer to poetry or not very comfortable with reading poetry, her poems are so approachable. They say what she means. There's nothing to really dissect about them, although you can look for deeper meanings, which there definitely are, but I think everyone needs to read some Mary Oliver poetry. So I tabbed a lot of my favorites, which is almost every poem I put a little tab on. But I thought I would read you maybe one or two of my favorites so that you guys can enjoy her beautiful words as well. This is the poem that I shared in my review on Fable and Goodreads, and it's called The Hummingbirds. In this book, there are many hummingbirds. The blue-throated, the bumblebee, the calliope, the cinnamon, the lucifer, and of course the ruby-throated. Imagine! Well, that's all you can do, for they're swift as the wind, and they fly not across the pages, but, like many shy and otherworldly things, between them. I know you'll keep looking now that I've told you. I'm hungry to see them too, but I can't hold them back even for a moment. They're busy, as all things are, with their own lives. So all I can do is let you know that they're here somewhere. All I can do is tell you by putting my own hunger on the page. I love that visual of hummingbirds flying between the pages. And oh my gosh, it's just so brilliant. This one is called What Gorgeous Thing. I don't know what gorgeous thing the bluebird keeps saying, his voice easing out of his throat, beak, body into the pink air of the early morning. I like it, whatever it is. Sometimes it seems the only thing in the world that is without dark thoughts. Sometimes it seems the only thing in the world that is without questions that can't and probably never will be answered. The only thing that is entirely content with the pink, then clear white morning, and gratefully says so. Okay, I'll share one more because this is one of my favorites from the collection, and it's called On Not Mowing the Lawn, which I love. If you guys don't know, every spring, it happened in one of my recent videos. I'll put the video up here in the cards. But every spring and summer, the landscapers, so my dad usually likes to landscape our yard because he's a gardener and both of my parents love gardening. And so, but my neighbors usually have landscapers come and mow their lawns. And every time the landscapers come is always when I'm filming a video. And anyway, I have figured out their schedule and I will no longer be filming when they are mowing the lawns. But I read this poem and I was like, Mary, you get me. You get me. So it says, On Not Mowing the Lawn. Let the grass spring up tall, let its roots sing and the seeds begin their scattering. Let the weeds rejoice and be prolific throughout. Let the noise of the mower be banished. Hurrah! I love the hurrah. Let the path become where I choose to walk and not otherwise established. Let the goldfinches be furnished their humble dinner. Let the sparrows determine their homes in security. Let the honeysuckle reach as high as my window that it may look in. Let the mice fill their barns and bins with a sufficiency. Let anything created that wants to creep or leap forward be able to do so. Let the grasshopper have sliding space. Let the noise of the mower be banished, yes, yes. Let the katydid return and announce himself in the long evenings. Let the blades of grass surge back from the last cutting, or, if you want to be poetic, the leaves of grass. And I wrote down here a nod to our good friend Walt Whitman. Mary Oliver loved Walt Whitman's poetry and just loved Walt Whitman and called him a friend. And that's how I got introduced to Mary Oliver, because I discovered Upstream. So I found Upstream when I was working at Barnes & Noble in 2019 or before the pandemic, 2019 and the beginning of 2020. And I read the back and it says, Mary Oliver reflects on her willingness to lose herself within the beauty and mysteries of the natural world and the world of literature, emphasizing the significance of her childhood friend, Walt Whitman, who inspired her to vanish into the world of her own writing. and then it just talks a bit about upstream. So I discovered Mary Oliver through stumbling upon this book, reading the back, seeing that she saw a friend in Walt Whitman, and anyone who sees a friend in Walt Whitman is a friend of mine, because I also see Walt Whitman as a friend, and now I see Mary Oliver as a friend. So I love Mary Oliver. I highly recommend reading Upstream. I also highly recommend reading Blue Horses. It's such an incredibly elegant and eloquent and touching collection of poems, and I just cannot recommend her work enough. I also, of course, recommend Devotions. The second I finished Blue Horses, I just wanted to keep reading more of her poems, so I think I might start another one that I have on my shelves. So the next ones I have on my shelves, I have New and Selected Poems Volume 1 of Mary Oliver's, and then I also have A Thousand Mornings, which I think I'm going to read A Thousand Mornings next, because it's a similar style and size to Blue Horses, and this one I think I want to save. I don't remember starting this, but there's, for some reason, a bookmark in it. Maybe I just randomly placed the bookmark in it. I don't know. But anyway, the book that I am currently reading, I just want to briefly touch on, that I will continue to read in June. It is one of the greatest books I've ever read in my entire life, and that is East of Eden. We are reading this for the Game of Tomes book club. If you would like to join, there's a link in the description to join the Game of Tomes book club and the Well Read book club, but this is one of the greatest books I've ever read in my whole life, and I can't wait to tell you more about it when I finish it at the end of June. So, I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed hearing what books I read in May. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I would love to know what books you read in May. So I hope you are having a wonderful start to the month, start to June, and I look forward to all the books that I will be reading this month, and I would love to know what books you're planning on reading in June, although I might do a June TBR. I'm not sure yet. But anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. I am sending you my very best wishes, and as always, happy reading. Thank you!